Man, this is a blurry. Let's see who pops up. Let's see here. Katrina is on board. Hey, Katrina, what's going on? Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to the class. I'm gonna wait. Not a lot of people signed up, and that's okay. We'll wait for a few more people, and then we're gonna get started.
Okay, no problem. Can you hear me?
Night.
It's been a crazy night, if I can be honest. It's been a crazy day, really. Hello?
Everything works out. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you.
Here, so about one more minute. I'm gonna log in. Usually when I do classes, I log in from my phone as well, so I can what is this doing? So I can chat and stuff with people. Let's see here. I wanna join. I don't know my own ID. Meeting ID 406-925-470. 406-925-470. All right. Cancel. Alrighty, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start. All right, so welcome. This is my Understanding Soul Archetypes class. I'm gonna try to keep it to around an hour. Last time I did the class, I think it was like an hour and a half, depending on the questions and comments and how many people join. So while I'm going through this, I asked that if there's going to be any type of like noise back or anything, just try to mute it. If you have any questions, feel free to stop, ask, interject comments. It's okay with me. This is being recorded, and usually my recorded videos, I have a replay of them. So it's always good for the other people who come back to listen to it to kind of hear input and questions and stuff like that. So I absolutely do not mind that at all. All right. All right. So these are the table of contents. This is what we're going to be discussing during this workshop. Part 1, Introduction to Archetypes. We're going to briefly talk about shadow. We're going to talk about the 4 archetypes of survival, which is the child, the victim, the saboteur, and the prostitute. Part 2, we will be discussing gallery of archetypes, archetype wheel, chart of origin, and casting a working chart. And that just made me remember that I forgot to send the materials with this class. So I will either before the class ends, either before the class ends, I'm going to try to find a way to provide you with those resources because it's going to be extremely important. Um, yeah, I'll actually share the content once I get to part two because I'm actually going to I'm going to go into my working chart, my chart of origin to show you guys how to go ahead and set your stuff up. So, what is my life purpose? We all ask this question from time to time. I know I do on a consistent basis. I probably did this morning and probably an hour before, I started this class. It's something that we all ponder about, and without any type of knowledge um, about ourselves, any, deeper understanding, this question can be very daunting, and it feels like we may not even be able to answer it. So, have you ever wondered, what your mission in life was supposed to be? And you probably know people who seem to have had their entire life mapped out from the day they were born. And this could have left you kind of envious, of their sure sense of what they were born to do, their work, their career, their marriage, and their personal goals. So, according to Caroline Mess, she's a medical intuitive and a leading voice in consciousness, spirituality, and holistic health. She believes that each of us is guided by a sacred contract that our soul made before we were even born. And this contract contains a wide range of agreements regarding all that we are intended to learn in this lifetime. It not only touches on what kind of work that we do, but also our key relationships with the people who are to help us learn the lessons we have agreed to work on. Each of those relationships represents an individual contract that is part of your overall sacred contract and may require you to be in a certain place at a certain time to be with that particular person. So this doesn't mean that free will does not play a role in your sacred contract. At any given moment or choice point, your contract may provide you with an opportunity for growth. It can come in the form of a challenge at work, the dissolution of an old relationship, or the formation of a new relationship. So your contract is made up of all these components of your life, yet it cannot be reduced to just any one of them by itself. One way of viewing your contract as your overall relationship to your personal power and your spiritual power. It determines how you work with your energy and to whom you give it to. Finding and fulfilling your sacred contract also depends on how much you are willing to surrender to divine guidance. So, Caroline believes that, we each agree to the terms of our contract before we enter the physical realm of this world. This applies to whether you accept the concept of reincarnation or not, right? Whether you believe in a heaven or hell, or a single lifetime or neither. So if you think of your life's direction as something to which you have agreed, then what formerly seems like torture or, that you're at a disadvantage and these conditions can be seen in another light. We're here on this earth and we go through these challenges and these obstacles and we're like, why am I going through this? What did I do to deserve this? And realistically, this may be something that we actually signed up for. So looking at it in that manner kind of makes it a little bit different, right? They are part of the roadmap that you've agreed to follow. Each event, each person of any significance whom you encounter has an agreed on role in your learning experience. I mean, that goes for everybody, for me, for my clients, for you guys, anybody that I come in contact with, I feel like, is definitely a reason for that, right? And that goes back to that contract. So sometimes the learning is difficult because you don't always want to surrender to the situation. It may take time for you to see the reasons for it, but the sooner you do, the less painful it becomes. In time, you can learn to accept each event as it happens without struggling against it and prolonging your psychic and physical suffering. To have a serious illness or injury is difficult enough. Seeing it as a punishment or, cruel caprice of fate only makes it harder to bear. The resulting stress will probably also make it worse, and you will take longer to heal or recover. Naturally, you can't be expected to see everything immediately or in advance, but if you have a way of looking at the symbolic meaning of your experiences, you'll be better prepared to accept the inevitable changes to your life. Fighting change builds up emotional scar tissue. Surrendering to divine will allow you to accept the changes and to get on with your life. And to help you understand and fulfill the terms of your sacred contract, you have been encoded with a set of 12 primary archetypes. Four of these are universal archetypes of survival: the child, the victim, the prostitute, and the saboteur. The other eight are drawn from the vast storehouse of archetypes dating back to the dawn of human history. And so that's basically what an archetype is composed of. It's a collective human consciousness dating back to, like I said, the dawn of human history. And these collective consciousness, there's so many of them, right? But again, everybody has that four primary. We all have the same four primary. The shadow. Do you have any questions so far about that introduction?
No, I'm right here with you.
Huh?
No, I'm right here with you. I'm listening to every word. I agree. I'm here.
Okay, cool. All right, so all archetypes have shadow manifestations as well as positive aspects. The shadow has power precisely because it remains in the dark. We tend to deny its presence in us because we consider it unacceptable. Only when we face and acknowledge the shadow's presence can we neutralize its potential negative impact on us. Now, for those of you that have ever gotten a reading from me, you know that when I speak about the shadow doesn't necessarily always mean that there's bad things in your shadow. We have good things that are in our shadow as well, right? Things that we maybe hide away because we were forced to, our environment, our life, society. Um, and so that's just something to kind of think about as well. And so the four primary archetypes of survival: the child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur are all deeply involved in your most pressing challenges related to survival. Each one represents different issues, fears, and vulnerabilities that you need to confront and overcome as part of your sacred contract. In doing so, you come to see these four archetypes as your most trusted allies, which can represent spiritual as well as material strengths. They can become your guardians and will preserve your integrity, refusing to let you negotiate it away in the name of survival. Keep in mind that, like all archetypes, their energies are essentially neutral, despite the negative connotations of their names. So, archetypes is kind of like a gun, right? Guns don't kill people, people kill people. So it's like, looking at the prostitute, that sounds crazy to think that we all have a prostitute archetype built into us, right? And a saboteur, like, just looking at those words. So, moving forward into understanding.
Sense, though.
You got something to
The
say?
prostitute, at least. It kind of makes sense, though. The prostitute, at least, because I feel like all of us have a part of ourselves that we sell out.
Right. And you're getting right into it as far as the shadow side. There's also a light aspect to it, but you're definitely on the money with that prostitute archetype. So just with these, especially, the child doesn't seem kind of hard. The victim is like, but prostitute is saboteur. So let's just disassociate from the negative connotation and just look at the word for what it is and not really try to associate anything with it right now.
Mm-hmm.
So the outline of your sacred contract may have been agreed upon before your birth, and yet, the way in which you respond to challenges presented to you and how you choose to interact with the people with whom you have contracts is fully up to you. If your choices are made unconsciously and you act defensively and fearfully, you may not learn and grow as you should. So the more conscious you can remain about the archetypal patterns influencing your behavior, the more likely that your choices and lessons will be positive. And now we're going to get into the child. So the mature personality of the child archetype nurtures that part of us that yearns to be lighthearted and innocent, expecting the wonders of tomorrow, regardless of age. This part of our nature contributes greatly to our ability to sense playfulness in our lives, balancing the seriousness of adult responsibilities. The balanced child is a delight to be around because the energy that flows from this part of our personality is positively infectious and brings out the best in others as well in us. The child also establishes our perceptions of life, safety, nurture, loyalty, and family. Its many aspects include the wounded child, abandoned child, or orphan, dependent, innocent, nature, and the divine child, and we're going over all of them. These energies may emerge in response to different situations in which you find yourself, yet the core issue of all the child archetypes is dependency versus responsibility. When to take responsibility and when to have a healthy dependency, when to stand up for the group and when to embrace communal life. Each of the variants of the child archetype is characterized by certain tendencies, including shadow tendencies. And we're going to go into the wounded child. The wounded child archetype holds the memories of abuse, neglect, and other traumas that we have endured during childhood. This is the child pattern most people relate to. I got my hand up because Lord knows I've had my, stint of abuse and neglect and trauma in my childhood. And this is particularly since it's become the focus of therapy since the 60s. Many people blame the relationship with their parents that created their wounded child, for instance, for all their dysfunctional relationships moving forward in life. On the positive side, however, the painful experiences of the wounded child often awaken a deep sense of compassion and a desire to help other wounded children. From a spiritual perspective, a wounded childhood cracks open the learning path of forgiveness. The shadow aspect may manifest as an abiding sense of self-pity, a tendency to blame our parents for any current shortcomings and to resist moving on through forgiveness. It may also lead us to seek out parental figures in all difficult situations rather than relying on our own resourcefulness. And prime example, um, women tend to have that daddy complex with their significant other, looking to their husbands to take on that father role when that's not really what that should be about. And the same thing as far as with men. Some of them look at their women, their partners, as if they should be their mothers. Prime example, the movie Baby Boy, like he just didn't want to grow up and he just felt like he should be taken care of and he was a grown adult. So, that's kind of how the wounded child would play out, um, in a real time kind of example. Next, we have the orphan child. And so from Little Orphan Nanny to Cinderella, the orphan child in most well-known children's stories reflects the lives of people who feel from birth as if they're not a part of their family, including the family psyche or tribal spirit. But because orphans are not allowed into the family circle, they have to develop independence early on. The absence of family influences, attitudes, and traditions inspires or compels the orphan child to kind of construct an inner reality based on personal judgment and experience. The shadow aspect manifests when orphans never recover from the feelings of abandonment, and the scar tissue from family rejection kind of stifles and hinders their maturation, often causing them to seek out a surrogate family structure to experience that tribal union that we all, feel. We all want to be a part of something and belong. Therapeutic support groups become shadow tribes or families for an orphan child who knows deep down that healing these wounds require moving on to adulthood. For that reason, establishing mature relationships remains a challenge. Um, in the shadow aspect, before I move on to the innocent child, um, gangs, people that join gangs, you know, people who tend to befriend people who they know don't care about them. They just they want to belong and they don't care, you know, what's at stake to kind of be a part of that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is it possible that two of the same type of archetypes can blend together?
Say that again.
Is it possible? So, like, you see how there's breakdowns for each of the child archetypes. Is
Yes.
it possible if like one or more of them could blend together?
As far as like, as far as what?
I don't know. As far as that, like manifesting into your personal life.
Oh, of course, yes. Do you mean like all of the child components together, like how there's more than one, or like different archetypes?
Well, just right now, as we're going through the workshop, and I'm listening to you talk about both of so far the two child archetypes that we've talked about, I relate to both of them.
Yes, and that is absolutely possible. And this is what you're going to. Yes. So yeah, just definitely yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They and the thing is, so we have that four primary, and then we're going to get into the chart of origin later on, which is kind of like your birth chart, but it's for your archetypes. Um,
Okay.
and so you're going to see how they all intertwine, and you could be operating with one sort of archetype. Your four is already set, but moving forward in your life, we're interchanging and we're operating under different archetypes sometimes, and then we could be operating under like how there's different components of the child archetype. I most definitely relate to all of the child archetypes that we're getting ready to go through. All of them are operable in my life currently, and I don't know about my chart of origin. I'm gonna have to look at that again. But yeah, definitely, I relate to all of the child archetypes. I am a child at heart. Um, I'm very strict. I have a lot of responsibilities. I'm a very responsible person. But people that know me, like personally, know that like I have like a Peter Pan syndrome. Like I'm a child at heart. I've suffered so much abuse. Um, and a whole lot of things, where I have a lot of healing to do in my child archetype. And that's okay. Sometimes I struggle and I feel like I don't fit in with certain people because of my maturity level in certain situations. But again, that's my own healing and things that I have to go through. But yeah, most definitely, you can operate, under all of these. So the magical child sees the potential for sacred beauty in all things and embodies qualities of wisdom and courage in the face of difficult circumstances. One example is Anne Frank, who wrote in her diary that in spite of all the horror surrounding her family while hiding from the Nazis in an attic, she still believed that humanity was basically good. This archetype is also gifted with the power of imagination and the belief that everything is possible. And I really feel like, as far as manifesting, um, especially manifesting your goals, you have to have some of that magical child archetype.
Hmm.
Because if you don't believe that things are possible, then you're never going to be able to manifest your dreams and things that you want to achieve in life. So that you have to carry that, I feel like, you know what I mean? The shadow energy of the magical child manifests as the absence of the possibility of miracles and the transformation of evil to good. Attitudes of pessimism and depression, particularly when exploring dreams, often emerge from an injured magical child whose dreams were once upon a time thought foolish by cynical adults. The shadow may also manifest as a belief that energy and action are not required, allowing one to retreat into fantasy. And so that's how that magical child plays out on the light attribute and the shadow attribute. Next, we get into our nature child. This archetype inspires deep, intimate bonding with natural forces and has a particular affinity for friendships with animals. Although the nature child has tender emotional qualities, it can also have an inner toughness and ability to survive. And that's the resilience of nature herself. Nature children can develop advanced skills of communicating with animals, and in stories reflecting this archetype, an animal often comes to the rescue of its child companion. Many veterinarians and animal rights activists resonate with this archetype because they have felt a conscious rapport with animals since childhood. Other adults describe being in communication with nature spirits and learning to work in harmony with them and maintaining the order of nature. The shadow aspect of the nature child manifests in a tendency to abuse animals and people and the environment. A love of animals is not sufficient to qualify for this archetype, however. A lifelong pattern of relating to animals in an intimate and caring way, to the extent that your psyche and spirit needs these bonds as a crucial part of your own well-being, that's your best clue. The number one person who sticks out in my mind is Steve Irwin, that white guy. I don't know if he was Australian, but
Yeah, he's
life was,
Australian.
yeah, he was dedicated to animals, and he passed that on to his daughter. So he thrived in that nature child archetype. That was part of his, his chart of origin, so to speak. Next
With
we
the
have, oh, go ahead. You got something to say?
Yeah, with the nature child, does it just have to be like a connection to animals, or can it be like connecting to like nature itself?
Yes. Yes, definitely connecting to nature, wanting to be outdoors. Me, I hate wearing shoes. I
Me
grew
too.
up in Massachusetts near beaches. Anytime at work, I take my shoes off. Anywhere I go, if I can take my shoes off, I'm taking them off. I need that connection to the ground, to the earth. You know what I mean? So yeah, most definitely, it doesn't just have to be towards animals, and it's something that you need to kind of survive to keep you going. Not, I got to get outside. Like, you need this connection, and you've always been like this. You know what I mean? Since you were a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, my daughter, my youngest daughter, she loves to be outside, playing in the dirt. Like, she needed that as a child, and I allowed her to do so. I let her go out and play. I didn't hinder her, from wanting that connection with outdoors, because that's how I grew up. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I was connected to beaches, outdoors, the forest. Like, that's how I grew up as well. So most definitely. Um, this next archetype is Puer or Puya, Eternus or eternal boy or girl. I'm doing some walking around. I had to get my cards quick. All right. So the shadow of this archetype can manifest in women as extreme dependence on those who take charge of their physical security. She cannot be relied on, nor can she accept the aging process. Unfortunately, that's me. I am in denial of me aging. I'm kind of like that eternal child. Like, I just, I'm just a child at heart. It's hard for me to accept that I'm getting older. Like, I can't even believe that I'm 37 years old. Um, Although few people delight in the end of their youth, the eternal child sometimes is left floundering and ungrounded between the stages of life because of not having a laid foundation for a functioning adulthood. Um, a lifelong pattern of relating, that is part of the other one. I got to get this out of here. Matter of fact, I'm sorry. Let me take care of this now because I'll probably forget.
No problem.
Where'd I go? Wait a minute. Because I should have took it out last time and I didn't. All right, this should not be here. All right. All right, so next we have the dependent child. The needy or dependent child carries a heavy feeling inside that nothing is ever enough and is always seeking to replace something lost in childhood, although exactly what is never clear. As with the wounded child, this leads to bouts of depression, only more severe. The dependent child tends to be focused on his own needs, often unable to see the needs of others. As with all apparently negative archetypes, you can learn to recognize its emergence and use it as a guide to alert you when you're in danger of falling into needy, self-absorbed attitudes and behavior. Next, we have our divine child. The divine child is closely related to both the innocent and the magical child, but is distinguished from them by its redemptive mission. It's associated with innocence, purity, and redemption, godlike qualities that suggest that the child enjoys a special union with the divine itself. Few people are inclined to choose the divine child as their dominant child archetype. However, They have difficulty acknowledging that they could live continually in divine innocence. And yet, divinity is also a reference point of your inner spirit that you can turn to when you are in conscious process of choice. You may also assume that anything divine cannot have a shadow aspect, but that's not realistic. I mean, we all come from the divine source. So the shadow of this archetype manifests as an inability to defend itself against negative forces. Even the mythic gods and most spiritual masters, including Jesus, who is the template of the divine child for the Christian tradition, simultaneously express anger and divine strength when confronting those who claim to represent heaven while manifesting injustice, arrogance, or other negative qualities. Think about when Jesus, kind of was angry at the people in the temple, and he flipped over the temple and he cussed everybody out. So we clearly see that divinity can express itself with anger. Assess your involvement with this archetype by asking whether you see life through the eyes of a benevolent, trusting God or goddess, or whether you tend to respond initially with fear of being hurt or with the desire to hurt others first. Next, we have the victim. Do not be misled by the name of this archetype. When properly recognized, the victim can alert you to the possibility that you are about to let yourself be victimized, whether through passivity or inappropriate actions. It can also help you recognize your own tendencies to victimize others for personal gain. We need to develop this clarity of insight, however, and that means learning the nature and intensity of the victim within. In its shadow manifestation, the victim tells you that you are always taken advantage of, and it's never your fault. We may like to play the victim at times because of the positive feedback we get in the form of sympathy or pity. Our goal is always to learn how to recognize these inappropriate attitudes in ourselves or others and to act accordingly. We are not meant to be victimized in life, but to learn how to handle challenges and outrun our fears. So the victim archetype is like our red flag. It's our red flag to alert us when we are being victimized by others or when we are victimizing others. All right, and no more, no less. And it's part of the primary. We all do it at some point in our lives, and we need to recognize when we are in the shadow aspect of this archetype. In establishing contact with your own inner victim, ask yourself, do I blame others for the circumstances of my own life? Do I spend time in the self-pity, party? Do I envy others who always seem to get what they want out of life? Do I feel victimized by others when situations don't work out the way that I wanted them to? Do I tend to feel more powerless than powerful? Next, we have the saboteur. This may be the most difficult of all the archetypes to understand because its name is associated with betrayal.
Before we move on?
Huh?
Can I ask a question before we move on?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So, for the victim archetype, I guess the thing that stood out to me the most in the slide before this one was that the victim often feels victimized by life and doesn't believe that it's ever their own fault.
Right.
I don't know, or maybe I should just let you finish, but is there like a reverse of that where like you do feel victimized, but you think that everything is your fault and not the other person's fault?
That may be another aspect to another archetype.
Okay.
Well, no, actually, nope. No. We're heading right into the right direction. What am I talking about?
Okay.
That's the saboteur. That's the saboteur when you feel like things are your fault. So let's get into this. So this archetype is not to sabotage you, but it's to help you learn the many ways in which you undermine yourself. So what you're saying sounds like you're undermining yourself. And so that's why I said we're heading in the right direction. We're kind of flowing because I feel like that's kind of associated with the saboteur. So how often do you set new plans in motion only to end up standing in your own way because of fears that undermine those optimistic plans? or you begin a new relationship and to destroy it because you begin to imagine a painful outcome. You begin a working relationship with another person and find yourself once again in a power struggle that could be settled peacefully, but you fall into the same destructive pattern because you fear the other person. So the saboteur's fears and issues are all related to low self-esteem that causes you to make choices that block your own empowerment and success. So does that kind of feel like it's answering
Yes, yes,
what
it
you
is.
had brought up?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And we all do it. I do it all the time. I still do it to this day now with my business. Sometimes I'm not gonna go live. Nobody's gonna care what I'm talking about. Even this class, definitely there was more than one person that signed up for the class, right? I could have just been like, I don't want to go forward with this, or I could have did so many things to just say forget it. I'm never going live again. I'm not doing any more of these workshops. It's self-sabotage. I know that I'm called to do these things, and everything happens for a reason. The people that connect with me, if they're on my workshops, it's because they needed to hear it at that time. And so that's why I'm here.
Mhm.
So we all do it, and it's hard um to kind of not self-sabotage. It really is hard. None of this that we're going over are things that are easy, like, oh, I'm just gonna snap my fingers and everything's gonna be okay. No, all of these things take time. It takes time, and it takes repetition, which equals ritualistic things, affirmations, the new moon ritual and the full moon ritual, all of the things that the products and services that even my readings that I provide are to help with all of this stuff. You know what I mean? So yeah, so as with the victim and the prostitute, you need to face this powerful archetype that we all possess, and we have to make it an ally, because if you don't make it an ally, you're just not going to achieve. You're going to self-destruct and self-sabotage. So when you make the saboteur archetype your ally, you'll find that it calls your attention to situations in which you are in danger of being sabotaged or of sabotaging yourself. Once you're comfortable with the saboteur, you learn to hear and heed these warnings, saving yourself untold grief from making the same mistakes over and over and over. Ignore it, and the shadow saboteur will manifest in the form of self-destructive behavior or the desire to undermine others. To learn how to become aware of the action of the saboteur within, ask yourself these questions. What fears have the most authority over me? List 3 of them. For, for me, so what fears have the most authority over me? My fear of judgment. That's big on me. Fear of I have a fear of being judged.
We share
So it's
that
like,
one.
yeah, it's like sometimes I say I don't care, but then my actions show otherwise, that I do care what other people think. So I know that's something that I have to work on, my fear of judgment, um, my fear of being accepted. I've been a loner. Uh, I've been called a weirdo my entire life. All the stuff now that the younger generation, I'm 37, I was born in 82. So like all the stuff that's accepted now with the generation, the younger millennials and the generation after that, all that stuff I was doing, and I was a weirdo. I grew up in the suburbs, and then 14, I had to move to the inner city of Philadelphia, and I wasn't accepted. I wasn't accepted for how I talked,
Mhm.
how I dressed, the fact that I wanted to achieve good grades. Like it just was crazy. So, fear of judgment, fear of not being accepted, and what would I say? My third one would be what fears have the most authority over me? Judgment, acceptance, and I don't know, not having somebody to be close to. I guess being lonely would be my third one. Katrina, do you have 3 that you want to share? You don't have to.
I think the three that you said are valid. If I could maybe add two, I think fear of having no success
Right,
and um I guess this one I guess it would go back to being accepted, but like fear of like not being like being disowned by my close family, I guess.
right. And so these are very valid things, you know. And so the next question is, what happens when a fear overtakes me? Does it make me silent? Do I allow people to speak for me? Um, I just shut down. I shut down and I go into hiding. Um, that's the best way instead of, trying to figure out, ways to deal with it. I just would shut down and just, try to ignore these things. So, do I agree to some things out of fear that I otherwise would not agree to? Have I let creative opportunities pass me by? How conscious am I in the moment that I am sabotaging myself? Am I able to recognize the saboteur in others? Would I be able to offer others advice about how to challenge one's saboteur? If so, what would that be? For self destructive mode, I basically, I've got to tell people, you know, journal. Journal your feelings. Audio is good if you want to. Some people do audio journals and record. I used to do that. I used to do that with my poetry. Um, the internet, link up, find Facebook groups. There's all types of groups that you can connect with now, and some people are scary and thinking that they can't find healthy, positive relationships through the internet, but you really can. I mean, my
Mm.
husband, we met through the internet and through our faith and the things that we do. I mean, I've had internet friends for years. I would say at least 6, 7 years. People I've never physically met, but have come through for me as far as finances, as far as being there. So that's another thing, to kind of branch out and look for like-minded people to kind of help. That helps gain that confidence. Affirmations, of course, always help. Um, and just understanding what puts you in that space of fear.
So, um, for me, could I share like a little personal example?
Yeah.
So for me, I think one of the ways that this last slide stuck out to me is that like I'm a singer. I've been singing my entire life, and I don't know. I you can't get me to shut up. Like I love to sing, but I developed a smoking habit. You know, like
Right.
that's the way that I'm sabotaging myself.
Right. Right. And that's a prime example. And you know, being aware is always the first step. Being aware and understanding that when we're trying to get out of these self-sabotaging behaviors, there is a process. And I don't know, it was a couple days ago. Let me check. I had posted on my Instagram the space before transformation, right? There are things that have to spiritually happen and physically. Your body goes through changes before that shift can happen. And then there's the will. You have to have the desire to want to change. So, and that's a whole nother story that, so how do we get to move through these processes for this transformation? That's a whole nother class, but just becoming aware is really the first step. And so next we have the prostitute. And so none of us thinks, kindly of the term prostitute. And yet from this archetype, we learn the great gift of never again having to compromise our body, mind, or spirit. You may have already reached the point in which the prostitute has become a mature part of yourself that circles you with a strong vibration field that says, not for sale. The prostitute archetype engages lessons in the sale or negotiation of your integrity or spirit due to fears of physical survival or financial gain. It activates the aspects of the unconscious that are related to seduction and control, whereby you are as capable of buying a controlling interest in another person as you are of selling your own power. So not only, does this archetype represent us selling ourselves, it represents us kind of pimping out other people as well. Prostitution should be understood as the selling or selling out of your talents, ideas, and any other expression of yourself. The core learning of the prostitute relates to the need to birth and refine self-esteem and self-respect. And we see this all the time, especially in people who want to be famous, the things that people will do to be famous, not even successful or rich, but to be famous. People will sell themselves out. And we sometimes use that terminology as they sold to the devil, right? And that's just that prostitute archetype in the shadow aspect. We prostitute ourselves when we sell our bodies or minds for money or when we compromise our morals and ethics for financial gain. That may include remaining in a marriage or job that endangers our well-being for reasons of financial security. So that hits hard when I read that. That may include remaining in a marriage or job that endangers our well-being for reasons of financial security. Not only a marriage, but a relationship. I know so many people that stay in marriages because they can't go or they feel like they can't make money of their own, or men and women, right? And so not only is that a victim archetype, but that is also the prostitute archetype. So those two archetypes are kind of intertwining, and that's both the shadow aspect of those two archetypes. So in identifying this archetype, ask yourself, have I ever sold out to people or organizations that I did not truly believe in? Have I remained in a situation that offered me financial protection because of a desire for financial security? Have I ever put another person in the position of compromising him or herself in order to gain power over that individual? Have I ever bought another person's loyalty, support, or even silence in order to have my way? I honestly can answer yes to all of those questions.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, honestly, it's a yes to all of them. Now we're going to go to this from another perspective. Have I ever offered to help another who was weakened by his or her prostitute archetype? Do I judge others because they find themselves continuously compromising themselves? Do I think of them as weak and myself as a better person? I have to answer yes to that again. Do I judge others? Number one person I judge is my mother. I feel like some of the situations that she's placed herself in, sometimes I do look at her as weak, and is that right or wrong? I don't know, but I'm just being real. You know what I mean? Like, I've done it. And that's the best example that I can come up with. She's in a better place now, thank goodness, but I viewed her as weak because I knew that she was operating in a way that she never really has before. It was like she wasn't herself. And so she was allowing the prostitute archetype, the shadow aspect of it, to keep her in marriages that were not beneficial to her because she felt like she couldn't take care of herself. So she allowed herself to be subjected to things, and I just didn't like it. I was angry at her. I was very angry for a long time at my mom. And it kind of pushed me. It did two things. Growing up, I knew that's not what I wanted to do in my life. So I chose to approach relationships and marriage in a different manner. And then negatively, like I said, it made me look at her as weak, and it made me angry at her. I didn't want to talk to her. I was resentful of her. Literally, my stomach was in a knot whenever I would have to speak to my mom, and she knows this. You know, this is not anything that is just like, but I had to allow her. I spoke my piece, and I just had to allow her to be and take away the judgment. You know, take away the judgment. My number one fear, if we go back to those questions, my fear was of being judged, and I'm sitting here judging my mom. So, you know, it's all funny how we want to feel or don't want to feel, but we tend to do that stuff to other people.
Mhm.
And now another perspective. Have I ever felt myself being pulled into a circumstance that would require me to sell out my ethics, but then found myself strong enough to say no? I've been in that situation as well.
Today, actually, I was in the situation.
And I commend you. If you were able to find your ground and say no and pull yourself from that's awesome. That's completely awesome. That's you operating in the light aspect of the prostitute archetype. And so once you've answered these questions, you may proceed to determining the rest of the archetypes. We're not getting into that yet. So this is where we get into part 2, and I am going to really quick get this information, or wait, you know what, it might still be, let me see, what can I share? I want to give a file. Let me see. File, my computer. And we have, here's one blank archetype. It's the wheel. And what else? Let me see. List of archetypes. Is it only letting me do it one at a time? I think so. List of archetypes. Blank archetype. And I have one more. If you have a problem getting these, let me know. I'll just send them to you by email after.
Okay.
And then where's the last one? Where's my, I'm missing one. List of archetypes. Where is it? Where's the documents? Let's see. Where is this? I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me look for this because I need this because I really need you guys to see. Where did I put it? I have to download it. This right here briefly was my coven. This is my platform. And I'm thinking about, I asked that a lot of people are interested in me bringing back the coven. So I'm still contemplating, but this is where, you know, a lot of my content, we went over a lot of things. So, but I'll get into that another time. All right, so this is part 2. We're going to be getting into Gallery of Archetypes. The archetype wheel, chart of origin, and casting a working chart. Oh, wait a minute. I was supposed to, let me send that chart chat. And I want to send that also. Natal chart. And here we go. All right. So that's in the group chat, all of the resources. A gallery of archetypes. So the resources that I just uploaded to this workshop was a blank wheel, a list of archetypes. I think it's at least 70. There's more. There's hundreds of archetypes, but I think I've only got 70 on there. And then I have my own chart of origin that is combined with my birth chart, because I want y'all to see how you integrate it with your birth chart and how important it is to have your chart of origin and your birth chart. So if you don't have your natal chart, that's something that you're going to have to get. And you have to, if you don't have your time of birth, that's okay. It's highly recommended so that it's very accurate. But if you don't have your time of birth, don't stress over it. But if you can get it, try to get it. So I've attached a list. These are just a list. The resource that I've attached has the definitions of each archetype as well. Okay, so I'm not going to go over these. I'm just going to read the names of them so we can kind of see. And after this class and at your leisure, because I provided the PDF, I want you to read through these archetypes, because building your chart of origin, you're going to have to understand the archetypes, and you're going to have to figure out what best fits you so you know what to put into your chart. We've got actor, anarchist, bureaucrat, caregiver, companion, crone, detective, diplomat, dreamer, fool, god, healer, historian, knight, magician, matriarch, muse, networker, patriarch, poet, priest, prophet, puck, rebel, revolutionary, sadist, scholar, seductress, servant, sidekick, storyteller, thief, tyrant, visionary, wizard, addict, artist, beggar, child, coward, crook, dictator, disciple, eternal, gala, goddess, herald, innovator, liberator, martyr, Midas, mystic, nun, pilgrim, politician, prince, prostitute, puppet, redeemer, robot, sage, scout, seeker, settler, slave, student, tramp, vampire, warrior, zombie, alchemist, avenger, bully, clown, craft person, damsel, dilettante, diva boy, girl, evangelist, gambler, gossip, hermit, judge, lover, masochist, monk, nature boy, nature girl, Olympian, pioneer, predator, princess, provocateur, Puritan, rescuer, saboteur, Samaritan, scribe, seer, shaman, spoiler, teacher, trickster, victim, witch. So and that's just 70. There's so many more. And so you see, you probably saw other archetypes that you may feel like you operate under, you know. And so next we're going to get into our archetype wheel, which I've also provided in the chat, a blank archetype wheel. And so we've gone over the 4 primary archetypes we need for survival. Remember, in the beginning of the course, I told you that we operate on 12. 4 of them are primary. The other 8, you have to meditate on and choose on what 8 other archetypes that you feel confident play a major role in your life. You want to combine the 8 you pick with the 4 survival archetypes, and then you have your 12, okay? So we have 4 primary that everybody on this planet is operating with, and then the other 8 is up for grabs.
So would you say that the 4 primary ones rule our behavior more than the other 8 that we choose to operate under?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily, no. It's just that everybody has those 4 primary ones. You may operate in one more than the other. You may operate in the other 8 more than the other 4. But in order for us to, like, you know, think and interact in the way that we do collectively, we all have those 4, but we all don't operate in them in the same manner. And you may operate, you know, less in the prostitute than you do in the other 8, or it could be the opposite, more in the others than the other 8. So it all depends on you, your stage of development. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So inevitably, you're gonna have to include some archetypes that, like the prostitute and saboteur, may at first seem unpleasant or negative. There's the fool, the robot. I definitely know I operate in a robot archetype at times. Martyr, servant, sadist, or puppet is part of your makeup. Remember that these are not necessarily negative. Only your interpretation is negative. They ultimately help you avoid the shadow aspect implicit in their name. To some people, the judge may seem like a negative archetype, implying a judgmental nature and may be cruel or imperious streak. But this archetype can be essential in making a wide range of informed decisions in areas as different as business and art. One day it might even save your life. So that judge archetype, instead of thinking it's always used to judge people, it can be used to judge situations, so you know how to operate and move in certain things. Simply ask yourself, and wait for answers to come. And here are some sample questions. What events or personal characteristics led me to choose this archetype? How long has this archetypal pattern been a part of my life? What role has this archetype played for me? Which prominent people have interacted with the aspect of my nature supported by this archetype? For instance, if it's the teacher archetype, think of the people who have played important roles in your own education or inspired you to be a teacher to others. What relationship might it have to my personal unfinished business, to those people I haven't forgiven, or the events in the past that I can't let go of? And might this archetype now help me in healing those situations? What myths, fairy tales, or spiritual stories that have meaning for me do I associate with this particular archetype? Has this archetype appeared in my dreams? Does thinking of this archetype make me feel empowered or disempowered? And you should also look for spiritual resonance in your archetypes. Ask yourself, what impact has this archetype had on my spirituality? What have I learned about my own shadow aspect through this archetype? Has it caused me to block or allow change that needs to happen? What immediate guidance might this archetype have to offer me in this present moment? After questioning each prospective archetype, weed out those that are not genuinely part of your intimate support team, and then return to the list to select replacements. Continue this process until you have 8 archetypes that you feel confident play a major role in your life. Combined with the 4 survival archetypes, you now have your 12. So you're gonna take that list that I gave you and you're gonna read it. Take your time. This is not to be rushed. If it takes you a month, let it take a month. If it takes you 2 months, let it take you 2 months. You've been going on this long without understanding archetypes. There's no reason to rush and feel like you have to have this planted right then and there. That PDF is like 100 pages. So, I would read through each and every one of those archetypes. I read through each of them before I chose which ones I wanted to, be a part of my chart of origin. So it's very important to read. Don't just pick one without reading and understanding what it's all about. All right, and so this is the archetype wheel, which I presented to you. It doesn't have the colors. The one that I gave you is blank, okay? So you're gonna fill this out, 1 through 12, each block around, just like how you see here. The 12 houses of the wheel. All right, and so you're gonna list, this is what you're gonna list on either a separate piece of paper or in the back of your paper to understand what each house represents. So number 1 represents Aries, and it's your personality, ego, and it's the face you present to the outside world. Number 2 is going to be Taurus, or your life values, and this represents ownership, finances, and your relationship to earthly power. 3 is Gemini, self-expression, siblings, the power of choice. 4 is Cancer, home, establishing your emotional foundation. Leo, 5 is Leo, creativity, good fortune, erotic energies, including creativity, sexuality, and synchronicity and chance. 6 is Virgo, occupation and health, seeking security in the physical world. 7 is Libra, relationships, marriage and partnership. 8 is Scorpio, and other people's resources, which represents stocks, inheritance, death, and closure. 9 is Sagittarius, spirituality, wisdom, publishing, traveling. 10 is Capricorn, your highest potential, completing the integration of the self. 11 is Aquarius, an interaction with the world, relating your creativity to humanity. And 12 is Pisces, the unconscious. So those are the labels for each house. Everything that I read off is for each component. And so the archetypal wheel is an intuitive tool that makes symbolic information accessible to you. Your 12 archetypes become even more significant when you observe them at work in the houses that signify 12 different aspects of your life. Like other intuitive tools, including tarot and the I Ching, the wheel helps you decode the behind-the-scenes pattern of your life. So this is another form of divination, so to speak. It shows you how your experiences and relationships are spiritual dramas filled with opportunities for personal transformation. Now we're going to get into your chart of origin. All right, so the basic alignment of archetypal energies located in the appropriate houses of an archetypal wheel is called your chart of origin, and it is similar in nature to a natal chart in astrology. But instead of the positions of the constellation at your birth, your chart of origin is based on the placement of your 12 primary archetypes within your wheel as determined by a simple intuitive process. So once you do your chart of origin, that's it. You can't do it anymore. It's like your birth chart is set. So that's why I want you guys to take your time reading and understanding the archetypes before you pick them, because your chart of origin is completely set. And so before you cast that, you'll need to select the 12 archetypes that make up your personal support group. You can get a pack of index cards and write as many archetypes as you can on an index card, 1 archetype per card. As an intuitive instrument, the archetypal wheel takes you beyond rational and logical perceptions into the realm of intuition. And out of this process can emerge a refined, more durable vision of your life's purpose. As you read the chart that you're about to create or cast, you may see how each of your archetypes interconnects with the others. And we were talking about that throughout the workshop. Even though you may not always see how the people and events in your life are linked to each other and to you, your wheel provides a map on which you can plot the points of interaction between them. This helps you to connect the dots and form a clearer picture of what is happening in your life. The wheel you're about to cast is called your chart of origin, and it serves as the basic map of your life. And for that reason, it's meant to be cast only once. There are 4 steps to casting your chart of origin. After you've centered yourself through meditation, proceed. Step 1, preparation. Cut out 24 pieces of paper about 2 inches by 3. On each of 12 slips, you want to write the name. You want to write the name of one of your 12 archetypes. On the other 12, you want to write the numbers 1 through 12 on one number on each slip of paper. Place the archetypes and the numbers in 2 different stacks face down. All right, and so the 12 is going to be the 4 primary, and then the 8 that you've looked at and you've read and you said, hey, I think these 8 kind of fit in with me. And so that's how you're going to determine what your 12 are. Step 2, the intuitive focus. After centering yourself, and before I even start there, you don't have to do this all at once. Again, if you want to break the step down, maybe week 1, I want to pick all 12 archetypes. Week 2, I want to go ahead and start the process of the chart. So again, this is something that I recommend taking your time. Like I said, we've gone this far without really understanding what archetypes are. There's no need to rush. So after centering yourself again, or using meditation, shuffle the 2 stacks of paper, being careful to keep them separate. So the 1 through 12 pile, you're going to separate within itself. The archetype pile, you're going to separate within itself. And as you're shuffling the stack of archetypes, you're going to ask yourself, or ask the cards, in which house do these archetypes best serve me? Your intention creates a magnetic circuit that will direct the archetypes to the appropriate houses as you work with them in step 3. Step 3 is intuitive choice. Picture yourself as a hollow reed transmitting energy. Keeping the slips of paper face down, choose one from each pile, a number, and then choose an archetype. The numbers correspond to the house into which that archetype should go. Write the name of that archetype into the numbered house on your wheel. If you chose the number 5 and the child card, for example, your child archetype belongs in your 5th house of your wheel. Continue this exercise until all 12 houses are filled. Step 4. Once you have paired the archetypes with their houses, you have generated a unique energy field that represents the symbolic hologram of your unconscious. And so with that being said, I want to show you my chart so you can understand what the hell I'm talking about.
It makes sense so far, though. I get it. I understand. I'm here with you.
Right. Let me see here. I want to open this up some more. Now, so this is mine. I'm already going to tell y'all I'm missing an archetype in one of my houses I discovered. I did this. You see the date on this is December 3rd, 2017. So I was doing this 3 years ago, exploring and getting into my own archetype. So I'm going back into my own vault and trying to repurpose my content, you know what I mean, and bring everybody up to speed with stuff that I, basically have been working with for a few years now. So I've got to fix my chart of origin because I'm missing an archetype in one of them. And you see here, I've laid it out all nice and neat. I've got my table of contents, because not only is this my chart of origin, but it's my natal chart as well. So I've merged the two, natal chart and archetypal wheel. And that's why I said it's important to understand your natal chart, because then you can merge it with your archetype wheel. And then, your shadow work is going to be on point. There's no way you're not going to be able to, dive deep into some serious shadow work with this information about yourself. So here we have my first house. We know that it represents personality and ego, the face you present to the world. So the archetype I have for my first house with the lover. Now I'm just going to read this one. I don't want to read them all, but I will just go through each page so you can see how I have it set up. So for the first house, I have the lover. This archetype appears not only in those who are romantically inclined, but also in anyone who exhibits great passion and devotion. One can be a lover of art, music, gardening, Persian carpets, nature, or needlepoint. This key is having a sense of unbridled and exaggerated affection and appreciation of someone or something that influences the organization of your life and your environment. Now, remember, this is in connection with the face that I present to the outside world, who I'm represent, my identity, my attitude, my temperament, and other qualities. So this archetype is kind of embodying that house. It's connected to issues of self-esteem, because this archetype is strongly represented by one's physical appearance. Even if you have the lover archetype prominently in your psyche, you may repress this pattern out of a lack of self-esteem, especially regarding your physical attractiveness. The shadow lover manifests as an exaggerated of obsessive passion that has a destructive effect on one's physical or mental health and self-esteem. And so you see here at the bottom of that, I have Cancer. That my Cancer is in my first house. So that is my natal chart. So not only have I coupled the lover archetype with my first house and my personality and ego, I know that I have Cancer, which represents internalization, emotional bonding, birth, and giving form to that which is within. So it's a lot to take in. So my second house, it represents money, personal assets, self-worth, yada yada. Addict, the addict archetype is in my second house. In my natal chart, Leo is also operating in my second house. So imagine having the Leo zodiac with the addict archetype in my second house, which represents money, personal assets, self-worth, attitudes towards things, financial security, emotional well-being. And so, the addict archetype not only deals with drugs, but alcohol, food, sex, work, sports. You can be addicted to anything. It's not just a drug thing. And, symbolically, the shadow aspect of the addict represents a struggle with the willpower and the absence of self-control. So this just fits right into, I see it, how it plays out in my life. Once I put this together, and I included it with my natal chart. It was like a movie. Like I could just literally start to see how stuff was playing out in my life. Next, my third house, which is coupled with the wizard archetype and Virgo from my natal chart. I think I'm missing my archetype from my fourth house. So I'm gonna have to go back and pull to put the archetype in here. But Saturn and Libra is in my natal chart. So whatever is gonna the archetype I choose is gonna be coupled with those energies, right? And this represents family, home life. Next, I have my fifth house, and I have the mother archetype. And that's funny because the fifth house represents children and how you relate to them. Romance and love affairs are also found in the fifth house. So my mother archetype resides in my fifth house, along with my Scorpio and Jupiter, which is a part of my natal chart. And so Scorpio, Jupiter, and Uranus. For my sixth house, it's the child, the orphan archetype. Actually, it was the child, and I just listed all of the child archetypes for my sixth house. So at any given time, I could be operating under whichever child archetype in my sixth house. And then for my natal aspect, it's the Capricorn, Neptune, Sagittarius, Sun, and Venus. So I'm just going to briefly just run through these. Seventh house is my victim archetype. Capricorn and Mercury in there as well. Eighth house is the teacher archetype with Aquarius in there. Ninth house is the prostitute archetype with Pisces up in there. 10th house is rebel archetype with Aries up in there. And then 11th house holds my Saboteur with my Taurus and Moon. And 12th house is the hermit archetype with Cancer and Gemini in my 12th house. So it was just a completely different world open up to me. The world of me and understanding who I am, how I operate with other people, how other people may potentially see me. All of that just opened up on a completely different level once I casted my chart of origin. Next, we're going to move into casting a working chart. So because your chart of origin is like your natal astrology chart, you cast it only once. And that's why I always recommend that it should be paired with your natal chart once you've got those, two pieces of important information. After you've spent time exploring the basic relationships of your archetype to the houses in which they fall, you're ready to use a similar technique to obtain guidance in a variety of specific situations by casting what I call a working chart. You could, for example, ask for guidance with a health issue. So a working chart is kind of like a divination table, so to speak, right? In these cases, you would use the same two stacks of cards for which you cast your chart of origin. But as you're shuffling the cards, ask for guidance in a particular area, beginning with the phrase, I am open to. For example, I'm open to receiving one healing insight about my stress patterns and this illness. I'm open to recognizing why I block reconciliation with this particular individual. I'm open to receiving guidance about why I block my creativity. Open to receiving guidance about fears of losing money, guidance about my core reasons for wanting to quit. Open to recognizing my deepest fear in this relationship, open to recognizing the gift of this relationship. Don't ask yes or no questions, right? It's just like tarot. You want open-ended questions, and don't phrase questions that support your victim archetype, like, why were my parents so mean to me? Ask for guidance to help you understand your relationship with your parents, or ask for insight into your relationship with your spouse or your partner. And by all means, avoid asking about what's going on in someone else's mind. Like, why is my child acting distant from me? Or, what does Joan really want from me? So as long as you follow these guidelines, you'll receive significant guidance for just about any appropriate question or issue. Use one of the blank wheels that I provided for this training for each of your working charts. So you can create a plethora. You can create as many working charts as you want, right? And so then you want to write down the insight that come to you from each new pairing of your archetypes with the 12 houses. You may then compare these pairings to those from your chart of origin, paying special attention to any pairs that may happen to come out the same in both charts. So you're using the same 12 archetypes that you picked to create your chart of origin. You're going to use the same to create your working charts. Because at any given time, you're always operating under your 12 archetypes, but you may be operating, like I said earlier, in one more than the other at any given time. It changes. It's never going to be the same. Only thing is the same as your first chart. So that's it. You have any questions and or comments?
Let me think for a second.
That's fine. And while you're thinking about one, I want to share, because I actually I can't see myself. I don't know how this camera looks. This camera's horrible on my laptop. But I have purchased Caroline Misses Archetype cards. And what I wanted to let everybody know is I have to think of a rate that I'm going to charge, but if you need help in creating your chart of origin, that is something that I'm willing to do to help, because I have the cards, right? And just to kind of show how awesome these cards are, I'm going to go ahead and read one off. So, this one is the Addict. And it says light attribute. It helps you recognize and confront addictive behavior. Shadow attribute compromises integrity and honesty, allows an addictive pattern to have authority over your inner spirit. And then this comes with a book as well. So if I want to open up and look at Addict to get a better, understanding. Let me see, Addict. Here, there's more information. So it says, addict, which can also fall under conspicuous consumer, glutton, workaholic, and see also gambler. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 other archetypes that can kind of be associated with the addict. Not limited to drugs, alcohol, food, and sex. Helps you recognize when any external force has more authority over you, over your willpower than your inner spirit does. Perseverance in breaking its hold empowers your psyche. Shadow addict represents the absence of self-control and internal balance and compromises your integrity and your honesty. Look for a lifelong pattern of trying to overcome the tendency to need a substance or person so intensely that you compromise relationships, finances, integrity, character, or emotional and psychological well-being. Okay, and that's the addict one. So there's 70. There's about 70 in this entire deck. These are beautiful. I really like this deck. I just got it. And like I said, let me think of a rate and I am willing to partner um, with you to help you create your chart if you feel like this is something that you can't do on your own. All right, so I just want to throw that in there. And then again, any questions or comments on anything that we've gone over?
I did have one and then I just lost it. So I think my question was, the four main archetypes. Do you think they will ever like change or like morph into different ones as society like moves on and advances? Because for the prostitute archetype, I was thinking that it makes sense that everyone has that archetype because we do live in a capitalist society where we have to exchange our time for money in order to live.
Right. And, it could possibly be. I mean, what else is crazy about the archetypes is I talk a lot of it's associated with shadow work. And Carl Jung, or Carl Jung, however people want to pronounce it, the Swiss psychiatrist that kind of coined the term shadow work and coined archetypes. Like, this is still newly discovered stuff, even though we're understanding that we've been operating under these collective conscious, a collective consciousness to kind of form these archetypes. Um, that may shift. We don't know 100 years from now how society will operate. So that's a very great question, and I totally think that it is a possibility that it could change. Most definitely, our society is not what it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, biblical times. Um, so it's a possibility. I can't completely confirm that, but I don't see why that would not be a possibility. So yeah, that's a great question.
Do you think there are certain archetypes that are more helpful than others, or would you say that they're all equally helpful?
I would say equally. I don't think one takes precedence over the other. I think that they all play a part, like they like a piece of a pie. You know what I mean? When you divide it up, or a pizza, when you cut it into 12 slices and you take one, it takes away from it. So I feel like each archetype plays its part, and that's why it's very important to read all of them that I've provided so that you can understand how they operate, so that you know which one to pick. Now, the chart of origin, it's permanent. Could you go back and feel like, hey, maybe I picked the wrong archetype? That could be a possibility. That could definitely be a possibility. You may feel like, hey, maybe I didn't pick that one. And so that's why I say that take your time, sit on it. Maybe you pick your 12 and maybe you want to go back a couple days later and say, let me go back and look at these 12 and see if they really resonate and if this should be a part of my chart of origin. So, take your time. Um, take your time and just really try to understand the archetypes and how you resonate with the archetype. How does it resonate for you when you hear it, when you understand how it's used? Look at your life and see if you can see how you've used it in the past, or look at scenarios that played out where that archetype you feel like it was there. So the 12 archetypes that you pick, well, the 8 that you pick, because for a primary, the 8 archetypes that you pick, you should be able to see them prominently throughout your life. It should be like a theme, each one that you pick. One not necessarily taking precedence over the other, but maybe one coming into play at that particular time or situation, you know? So that's really an important aspect too.
Okay, I think I have one more question.
Hmm.
So I know it's not in the same way, but like how our natal chart progresses, do you think that like you can start off as one archetype and end up as another?
Yes, most definitely. And just like I said, shifts, paradigm shifts, growing, maturing, you know, and that's how you, and that's why it's important to kind of couple it with your natal chart so you can see that growth and see um how you were in one archetype at one point in your life and you're not there anymore. Um, for example, I don't want to. Do I want to? I don't want to use. I'm gonna stick with the four primary. Um, I would say the prostitute archetype. I've been in relationships myself, also, um, that were for financial gain, and I didn't want to be in them. You know, and today I wouldn't dare do anything like that. You know, I'm never going to compromise myself or feel like I have to put up with something because I feel like I can't take care of myself. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to never be in a situation like that ever again. So today I'm not operating under that shadow aspect of the prostitute archetype. Um, another, let me see if I can pick one that's not a primary. I have the cards right here. Let me look at the cards. So, uh, let me see here. Let me see how. They're all so good. Um, let me see here. Loyalty, romance. I can't pick one because at some point, like I said, the 12 that you initially pick is going to be the 12 that you're going to continuously use even when you're doing your working chart. So maybe you may end up in one more than the other, like how you said. So for instance, maybe, down the line, my kids are growing up. Maybe I won't operate in that mother archetype later on. You know what I mean? It'll be probably more primarily the other ones and not necessarily that mother archetype. So I guess I can use that one as an example, right? So today, I have teenagers. They're going to, and my nephew who I'm adopting, when they grow up and they're no longer in my home, that mother archetype is not going to be as, I'm always going to be a mom, but I won't be operating in it as hardcore as I am now, being there, caring for kids, cooking, cleaning, making sure they're going to school. The older they get, that mother archetype is going to kind of dwindle down more so than it would be right now. Was that like a good example for you?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, like the older they get, I'm not going to be in that mother mode that whole time, so maybe one of my other archetypes could kick in and I'll be operating in those more so than the mother one, right? Um, I'm always protective of friends and family, so the mother aspect is not going to go away, but it won't be as active or as a big part of my life as it is currently right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this was awesome. Like I said earlier, there were several people that had joined, and you shut up, and I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely all right with that. There's gonna be a replay. I'm going to do the free rate replay for my email community. Once the free replay has been done, then it's coming down and it's going on my my course platform. So this will be available as a course, along with the resources that I provided. So none of this will be provided for free. Everything is going to it'll be included in the cost of the class. So you'll get the blank chart, you'll get the PDF, and then you'll get my natal chart and wheel of archetypes, so you can kind of understand how to put yours together if you don't want to work with me. So this concludes this workshop. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I appreciate it. And again, if you listen to the replay, thank you for taking the time. I hope this benefits you. I hope it brings a plethora of knowledge and understanding to you and who you are as a person. Because that's the whole point of me bringing in this information. And I hope you guys have much success on creating your charts. And I hope that you will create working charts. And feel free to share with me. If you choose to do show, I would love to see them. So I will go ahead and I will talk to you later.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.